So today I'd like to talk about something that is very often overlooked or people are very negligent about, even though it is extremely important. Let's talk about safety when it comes to music production.
Supercy.
Hey everyone, Percy here. So, you like to record music, don't you? Well, most of you will already know, but especially if you're new to music production, let me tell you, there is nothing worse than having stored all your music on your computer and for some reason, could be a computer crash, could be a fire, it could be a burglary, whatever it is, everything is gone. Well, if that happens, you better have had some measures taken beforehand to prevent it from being gone for good. So today I'm going to talk about 5 things that I believe everyone in music production should consider to be safe. Okay, let's start with an easy one, a very obvious one also, but you'd be surprised how often this still causes heartaches. And that is, make sure to save your work regularly. So just hit that Control S or Option S on a Mac to save your work. I mean, it's super frustrating if you've been working on a song for an hour, especially if it's a new idea. All of a sudden your DAW freezes or crashes and it's all gone. I know that many DAWs nowadays have some kind of autosave function, but anyway, make sure that your song is saved every few minutes. Okay, next on the list is make backups. I cannot stress this enough. It's unbelievable to me how many people tell me that they don't have some kind of backup system in place. And especially if you're in music production, make backups. Now, in a way, there are 2 kinds of backups. Let's start with file backup, which is the most important kind of backup. In the context of music production, it means that you're backing up all the files that kind of make up the structure of the songs you've recorded. Now, what I recommend you doing about that is at least 2, maybe 3 things. Now, first of all, if possible, get an extra external hard drive. Doesn't have to be the fastest one or anything, as long as it has enough disk space. Now hook it up to your computer and set it up to make automatic or maybe semi-automatic backups periodically. Now if you're on a Mac computer, of course you can use the Time Machine, which is a program dedicated to doing exactly that. If you're on a Windows computer, there is a similar feature in there. For me personally, I think once a day should be enough, but of course that is totally up to you. Now, another thing I would recommend you doing is to make another backup that you store somewhere else. And that could either be another external hard drive that you make a backup on and store it somewhere else, as in at a friend's house or a family member, someone you trust. So that if there is something like a fire, let's hope that never happens, but should that happen, you should still have most of your files safely stored somewhere else. Now, alternatively, or maybe additionally, what you could also do is use a dedicated cloud-based backup service like Backblaze, Carbonite, iDrive, SpiderOak, Acronis, one of those services. So again, should there be something like a fire, you would still have a copy of all your files safely backed up in the cloud. Now, you could maybe also use something like Google Drive or OneDrive, but I don't think I would recommend that because those services aren't really optimized to make backups like that. Now, so far we've only discussed file backups. Now, what might also be very wise to consider is somehow backing up your system drive. And this is especially relevant if, like me, you're using a lot of plugins. Happened to me twice in less than 12 months. My computer crashed and I just couldn't get back in. I'm using a Windows computer and no matter what I tried, it just wasn't happening for me. Now, it's not exactly the absolute end of the world because I still had all my files backed up, but still what I had to do was first of all reinstall Windows, okay? Then I had to reinstall all the applications I had on my computer, and then I had to reinstall all the plugins I had on my computer. Took me about a week each time. Now, again, not really the end of the world, but especially if you're dependent on your computer, you might not want it to take a week or so before you can get it going again. And if you don't want that, you better make some kind of copy of your system drive or maybe a disk image, and hopefully if something like this happens, you can get it going again relatively quickly. Okay? Anyway, bottom line, make backups. Now, next item on the list is about downloading and installing plugins. Now, what I used to do is I would download the file, usually comes in a zip file, right? I would unpack the zip file, install the plugin, and as soon as it's installed, I would throw away everything. Zip file, installation file, everything, because I already have the plugin. Well, in most cases, that is not going to give you a problem, but it might. Let me give you an example of what might happen and what has happened to me. Now, let's say that you're working on several songs with a certain plugin, okay? Now, the developer releases an update of that plugin. Now, what sometimes happens is when you download and install an update is that it won't replace the older version. So what you end up with is two different versions of the same plugin on your computer. Now, the songs you've been working on so far are still connected to the older version. No problem so far. But now your computer crashes and you have to reinstall everything. Now, some developers won't allow you to download older versions. They only allow you to download the latest version. But the songs on your computer are still connected to the older version. They're looking for that older versions. So now what? You have a problem. So what I would recommend you doing is whenever you download a plugin, and I'm not talking about plugins from Native Instruments or Waves or Isotope, they have a different system of downloading and installing plugins. But whenever you download a plugin that comes in a zip file, store it on your computer. Don't throw it away. So when something like this happens, you can always reinstall the plugin. And also, some developers, if you purchase a plugin from them, they will offer you a limited amount of downloads. So if your computer crashes several times, you're running through those downloads very quickly if you haven't saved the file in the first place. So again, always store the downloaded files on your computer. So that brings me to the next item on the list, and that is if you're using plugin instruments, my advice is to, as much as possible and as soon as possible, bounce out your tracks, which basically means convert instrument tracks into audio tracks. And why? Well, for example, sometimes when a developer releases an update and you install the update, something changes. Happened to me with Omnisphere. Can you imagine Omnisphere, one of the most popular synths out there, one of the best synths out there if you ask me, but it happened. So they released an update, was a while ago. I installed the update and something changed to some of the songs that had Omnisphere on them, especially to some arpeggiated things. Well, it can sometimes be very difficult, if not impossible, to get it back to what it used to be, and it can sometimes really ruin your songs. So to prevent that from happening, my advice again is to bounce out your tracks, so you always have an audio version of those tracks. Now, what also happens sometimes is that the support for a certain plugin ends. It just stops. Now, this usually doesn't mean that the plugin ceases to be available from one day to another, but let's say that you want to listen to one of your older songs that you haven't listened to in a while, so you open the song and all of a sudden you notice that one or two of the plugins are no longer available. Well, that's a problem. Well, you wouldn't have had that problem, which you have bounced out the tracks. So always bounce out your tracks. So the last item on the list is also pretty obvious and very generic, but it's definitely worth mentioning because it's super important. And that relates to your internet connection and your behavior on the internet. Now, it's very important for anyone to be careful online, but especially if you're in music production, because you have a lot of files that are very important to you, your music files. So you want to prevent that from being compromised. So all the generic basic advice applies. So for example, make sure that your internet connection is secure, use a VPN if necessary, be careful what websites you visit, be careful what information you leave behind if, for example, you subscribe to a newsletter or something like that. Be careful what you download, make sure your password management is in order. So, for example, don't use the same password on all the websites you log into. Be careful what links you click in your emails. abide by these rules as much as possible. Because let me tell you what happened to me not too long ago, maybe 3 months ago or so. So I got an email from someone saying, okay, send me $1,000 worth of Bitcoins because I have some incriminating footage of you that I shot with the webcam of your laptop, and so on and so on. Now, I kind of suspected that it was a fake because he also mentioned some things that didn't really make sense, but still it was pretty scary, especially because he also knew one of my passwords. Now, luckily in the end it was confirmed that it was probably a fake, and it was a fake, it was a bluff. But can you imagine if one day you open your computer and you're unable to access your music files and you get a message from someone saying, okay, send me $1,000 or send me $10,000 or you will never see your music files again. That is a nightmare. So again, whenever you enter the digital public space, be safe, be smart and be safe. So that's all for today. Those are my 5 things that I think that everyone in music production should consider to stay safe. Hope it helps. Anyway, thank you for watching. Talk to you soon and stay safe.